Tulsi Gabbard stepped onto the hearing room floor with one purpose, and one purpose only, to shine a blinding light on hidden truths that had festered in the shadows of American politics for far too long. The weight of the moment hung thick in the air, palpable as morning fog rolling through a valley. This was not going to be another forgettable congressional session lost to the 24-hour news cycle. This was going to be different. Everyone in that chamber could feel it, even if they couldn't articulate exactly why. Adam Schiff entered the room expecting another routine oversight session. Just questions, answers, and the usual political theater that had become so predictable it might as well have been scripted. He had done this dance countless times before. The cameras would roll, the questions would come, and he would deflect with practiced ease, his politician's smile never wavering. He had built an entire career on moments like these, on his ability to control narratives and shape perceptions with the precision of a master craftsman. But within minutes, his composed facade began to crack under the weight of Tulsi's revelations. What had been billed as a standard review quickly morphed into a live spectacle, and by the time the gavel fell, a career hung in the balance, swaying like a condemned man on the gallows. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. Even her closest friends did not expect this. Nobody did. The tension was electric the morning that Tulsi Gabbard pushed open the heavy doors of the chamber. The cameras were already humming, their lenses raking every face in the room like searchlights scanning for fugitives. The Art Center gallery was packed to capacity, every single seat occupied by journalists, political observers, and ordinary citizens who had somehow secured access to what they sensed might be historic. Additional media booths had been hastily fitted into corners wherever technicians could find a nook, cramming equipment into spaces never designed to hold them. Internet traffic had already begun to surge across the nation as millions tuned in, their collective attention focused on this single room like sunlight through a magnifying glass. Tulsi nodded briefly in the direction of the committee members, a perfunctory acknowledgement of protocol, but her eyes were fixed elsewhere, her gaze locked onto Congressman Schiff with the unwavering focus of a hawk that has spotted its prey. "Congressman Schiff," she began, her voice calm but carrying an edge of steel beneath its measured tones. "I have several questions for you today, but before that, I must inform both this committee and the American people that I am submitting materials this morning which raise grave national security concerns about your conduct." A soft hum rippled through the chamber like electricity crackling through exposed wires. Journalists exchanged glances, committee members shifted in their seats. The atmosphere had changed in an instant, transforming from bureaucratic procedure to something far more consequential. Schiff reached for his microphone, his movements deliberate and controlled. "Director Gabbard," he said, masking his irritation beneath a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, "if we're about to witness another political performance, let me remind you that this committee is dedicated to facts, nothing more." Tulsi inclined her head slightly, the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Agreed. Let's proceed with the facts." She tapped a slender black binder positioned before her, an unassuming object that nonetheless held documents destined to reverberate through every major news outlet by day's end. Inside those pages lay the ammunition that would fundamentally alter how Americans viewed one of the most prominent figures in recent political history. She started with the stated objectives of the hearing: transparency, trust, and oversight. These were supposed to be the pillars upon which the entire proceeding rested. Then, systematically, methodically, she began to replay the mouthwork of Schiff in public on the Russia collusion saga. But this wasn't mere repetition. Each clip came with exact timestamps, video evidence, and declassified memos that directly refuted his public statements. Twice Schiff tried to interject, his voice rising with the urgency of a man watching his house catch fire. Both times the chair tactfully but decisively interrupted him, waving him back to silence with a firm hand. The rules of the hearing would be observed, and Tulsi Gabbard had the floor. Then came the first bombshell, detonating in the chamber with the force of an earthquake. "In 2019, you publicly declared incontrovertible evidence linking President Trump to collusion with Russian operatives," Tulsi said, her voice as steady as bedrock, yet newly declassified NSA intercepts prove no such evidence existed. What's more, internal messages from your office at the time show you knew it was unfounded. Silence swallowed the room whole. You could have heard a pin drop in that cavernous space. Schiff's jaw tightened visibly, the muscles cording beneath his skin. His eyes flickered between disbelief and barely concealed panic As the implications of her words sank in, Tulsi continued, her tone never wavering. I'm entering into the record an internal memo from your communications director, dated March 7th, 2019. The text reads as follows: We need to press the collusion narrative. Even if Mueller's report disappoints, the political payoff is worth it. One of Schiff's aides shifted uneasily in his seat, the color draining from his face. Cameras closed in like predators, sensing wounded prey. The chair leaned forward, his expression grave. Is that memo genuine, Director? It's been authenticated by the NSA, the Department of Justice, and the Inspector General, Tulsi replied without hesitation. Her words landed like hammer blows. With that single exchange, the hearing shed its routine veneer and transformed into an unprecedented showdown. The stakes had just risen exponentially, and everyone in that room understood that nothing would ever be the same. After a short recess called to restore some semblance of order, the atmosphere in the chamber had become nothing short of electric. The brief intermission had done nothing to calm the nerves of those present. If anything, it had only amplified the tension as people used their phones to check social media reactions and text messages from colleagues demanding to know what was happening inside. During those 15 minutes, Schiff had huddled with his legal team in a corner of the room, their voices hushed, but their body language speaking volumes. They gestured emphatically, shook their heads, rifled through documents, but nothing they could say would prepare him for what came next. Meanwhile, Tulsi had remained at her seat, calm as still water, reviewing her notes with the methodical precision of someone who knows exactly how the next few hours will unfold. Her preparation had been exhaustive. Months of investigation distilled into carefully organized binders that would systematically dismantle decades of carefully constructed political mythology. Social media feeds exploded with commentary and speculation. Cable networks abandoned their preset programming to broadcast live coverage, their anchors breathlessly narrating events as they unfolded. Inside the room, all eyes remained fixed on Tulsi, poised and unflappable as ever, while Schiff's confidence visibly eroded with each passing second. She resumed her examination with the precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. Congressman, are you aware that your financial disclosures from 2017 through 2021 show an $8.9 million discrepancy? Schiff blinked, clearly caught off guard by this sudden pivot. His hand trembled almost imperceptibly as it reached for the water glass before him. My filings were cleared by the Ethics Committee. I'm not sure what you mean, Tulsi nodded, her expression patient but unyielding. Let's examine the numbers together, shall we? A slide illuminated the massive screen behind her, casting its glow across the faces of everyone in attendance. On one side, the chart displayed his declared income, salary, speaking fees, book royalties. The figures were substantial but not extraordinary for a man of his position. On the other side, however, a second column told a very different story. Foreign wire transfers, private equity accounts, shell entities, registered in jurisdictions known for their banking secrecy. The sums didn't align, not even close. These documents, she explained with deliberate care, were the product of a joint Treasury Odney audit conducted over the past 18 months. Several transfers originated from a Cayman Islands consulting firm with documented ties to major defense contractors. Her voice remained measured, almost clinical in its detachment. But the implications of her words were anything but. Schiff's staff whispered urgently among themselves, their faces pale with dawning horror. He pressed his fingers to his temples, his head bowing under an invisible weight. The man who had so confidently entered this chamber just an hour earlier now looked like someone watching his entire world crumble. Tulsi pressed on, relentless as a rising tide. Here's a $1.2 million deposit into your personal trust in May 2020. Your signature appears on the authorization document. Do you deny it? He hesitated, his mouth opening and closing several times before words finally emerged. I need to consult legal counsel. You'll have that opportunity, Tulsi replied smoothly. But the American people deserve answers now. The chair signaled her to continue, and she presented yet another exhibit. This one detailed 3 high-volume real estate purchases, 2 properties in California and 1 in the District of Columbia. All 3 had been paid for in cash within a single calendar year. Such purchases would be unaffordable on his official income alone. Yet the pattern became clear when viewed alongside the undisclosed foreign financial inflows. Reporters feverishly typed on their laptops, their fingers flying across keyboards as they raced to be the first to break each new revelation. Schiff's aides looked on aghast, their professional composure shattered beyond repair. Still unfazed, Tulsi unveiled a suspicious activity report from Wells Fargo tied to an entity called Schiff Family Holdings LLC. This was an organization conspicuously absent from any public disclosure, a ghost company that should have been reported years ago. At that revelation, Schiff's voice cracked with barely suppressed rage. "These are outrageous accusations. You're alleging money laundering live on national television." Tulsi's eyes locked onto his, her gaze unwavering. "I'm presenting irrefutable evidence authenticated by multiple federal agencies. If any of it is false, you are welcome to seek recourse in court." Again, silence fell over the chamber, a heavy thud of collective disbelief settling over everyone present. The weight of the moment pressed down on the room like a physical force. The chair leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "Director Gabbard, is there more evidence?" Her nod was slight but resolute. "Much more." She reached for her folder again, and the entire room held its breath. This next tranche wasn't about money. It was about something far more fundamental, trust and betrayal on a scale that defied comprehension. Her hand hovered over a stack of redacted intelligence reports recently cleared for public release. Each document was a summary of NSA intercepts and communication logs spanning from 2017 to 2020, detailing Schiff's private exchanges with top media executives during the very peak of the collusion narrative that had torn the nation apart. A collective gasp rose from the gallery as the next set of documents appeared on screen, their contents more damaging than anything that had come before. These transcripts showed coordinated strategy sessions between a sitting congressman and major media figures, the kind of collusion that conspiracy theorists had long alleged, but few believed actually occurred at such levels. Unapproved talking points had been shared, crafted specifically to shape public perception without any factual basis. Embargoed memos had been leaked to friendly journalists who would present them as scoops rather than coordinated propaganda. The entire machinery of what Americans had been told was independent journalism now stood revealed as something far more calculated and far more sinister. The revelation struck at the heart of democratic discourse itself. How could citizens make informed decisions when the information they received was being carefully curated by political operatives working hand in hand with media executives? The implications extended far beyond Schiff himself, calling into question the entire information ecosystem that Americans relied upon to understand their world. Tulsi understood the magnitude of what she was revealing. This wasn't just about one congressman's misconduct, it was about the systematic manipulation of public opinion through coordinated messaging campaigns disguised as independent reporting. It was about the erosion of trust in institutions that democracy depends upon to function. A screen displayed one particularly damning exchange. March 2nd, 2018, 9:41 p.m., media executive. "Got anything solid to push this week?" Schiff, "Nothing definitive, but enough to maintain pressure. Obstruction, foreign entanglements, go heavy." Schiff exhaled visibly, looking drained of all vitality. The man who had built his reputation as a champion of truth and transparency now sat exposed as an architect of manufactured narratives. Tulsi held the room with her gaze, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "These intercepts show a pattern of deliberate manipulation, undermining public trust, exploiting intelligence for political gain." At that moment, the chamber no longer functioned as a podium of checkboxes and procedure. It had become a pressure cooker in which force and responsibility collided head-on. Tulsi Gabbard had come with the intentional purpose of revealing the truth, and in the process she was redefining the legacy of a political giant in front of millions of viewers around the world. When the last document was displayed, nothing would ever be the same. No rehearsals, no denials would ever restore what was being destroyed in real time. The words seemed to hang in midair, suspended by their own gravity. Adam Schiff's complexion drained to an unsettling gray, the color of old newspaper left in the sun. But Tulsi Gabbard pressed on without hesitation. "This committee has authenticated these messages," she began, her voice steady as granite. "The metadata aligns perfectly. Timestamps, originating devices, encryption protocols, they match what we'd expect from classified communications." Murmurs rippled through the room as she continued her methodical destruction. Congressman Schiff selectively released intelligence to sway public opinion, even admitting privately that he lacked any verified sources. He weaponized the trust placed in his position to advance a narrative he knew to be false. Schiff opened his mouth, his voice rising defensively. "That's a gross mischaracterization of what happened." Tulsi cut him off with surgical precision. "Members of Congress speak to the press all the time. but they don't hold pre-release briefings on sensitive intelligence, nor do they coordinate narrative attacks to imply guilt without proof. That's not reporting, it's information warfare against the American people. Silence fell like a curtain over the proceedings. Schiff glanced at the chair, who remained as impassive as a marble statue. Then Tulsi dropped her next bombshell. In July 2019, she said, her voice dropping to a tone that demanded attention, after a closed briefing, Congressman Schiff called a senior editor and said, and I quote directly from the transcript, "We're losing the narrative. Let's resurrect the back-channel Moscow communication story, even if it's purely speculative. I want it on air by Sunday." Now Schiff said nothing at all. He simply stared at the table before him, a man watching his life's work dissolve like morning mist. What this country endured during the Russia investigations, years of bitter division, shattered trust, media mania, wasn't an accident. It was manufactured, and one of its chief architects sits before us today. A hush spread through the chamber, the kind of silence that precedes earthquakes. Then Tulsi lowered her voice to a quiet rasp that somehow carried to every corner of the room. If this were mere bad judgment, we'd be in a different room having a different conversation. But this is deliberate disinformation by a sitting member of Congress. And the next document will prove it beyond any reasonable doubt. All eyes locked on the thin sheet of paper she held. Schiff shifted uneasily in his seat, the leather creaking beneath him. He knew what was coming. They all did. "This," she said, "is a $4.2 million advance paid to Congressman Schiff by a Delaware publishing house. Ostensibly a book deal, except its timing and contents point to a serious breach of national security protocols." She distributed copies to every member of the committee. The chair flipped through the first page, and his eyebrows rose visibly. Tulsi pressed on without pause. The contract was signed just 1 week after the China Joint Report on Eastern European cyber threats was sent to this committee. That report stayed classified. Yet 3 months later, Schiff's manuscript lifted entire passages. Reworded, yes, but unmistakably drawn from that classified material. Schiff leaned forward, his voice climbing. "That's categorically false. Any overlap is coincidence. My team worked with the National Security Council to ensure full compliance." Tulsi raised a single finger. "We confirmed with the Pre-Publication Review Office that no manuscript was ever submitted before print. That violates every protocol established to protect national security. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one." The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch, each revelation building upon the last like waves crashing against a weakening sea wall. Schiff opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. Words had failed him. Tulsi didn't skip a beat. "Beyond the book advance, we uncovered recurring consulting payments totaling $900,000 funneled through Marlowe Strategies, an LLC registered in Virginia, with no staff, no office, and no website. A ghost company designed to obscure the money's true origins." She clicked to the next slide, revealing a list of defense contractors that would make any investigative journalist's heart race. All of them maintained active security clearance projects with the federal government. 3 held spycraft contracts with the Department of Defense and CIA. 2 worked on cyber defense initiatives. 1 built surveillance networks used by intelligence agencies worldwide. All of them won approval while Schiff was chair of the Intelligence Committee. "These invoices," Tulsi pointed out, her finger tracing the entries on screen, "are described vaguely. Policy consultation, narrative alignment, briefing recap. Yet they arrived mere days after classified briefings. The pattern is unmistakable." Finally, Schiff spoke, his voice strained. "You're leaping from coincidences to conspiracies. My work has been above board for 2 decades. Tulsi leaned in, her voice calm but firm as iron. "In those 2 decades, have you ever disclosed your ties to Marlowe Strategies? Have you reported these payments in your financial filings?" He said nothing. The silence was its own answer. "We've cross-checked every disclosure. There's no record. That's a direct violation of House ethics rules and federal law." A committee member murmured something to the chair. Reporters exchanged astonished glances across the gallery. Tulsi laid one final document on the desk. "This is a sworn affidavit from a former executive at one of those defense firms. It states that Congressman Schiff personally requested talking points for cybersecurity hearings, while quietly collecting consulting fees from the same companies he was supposed to be overseeing." The chamber fell completely silent. Tulsi's voice broke the quiet like a blade through silk. "This isn't merely influence, it's control. And if these allegations hold true, Congressman Schiff compromised classified operations for personal gain. She paused, letting the words sink into the consciousness of everyone present. Next, we turn to January 6th. The hearing, once a routine policy discussion, had transformed into something far darker, a journey into the depths of political opportunism that even the most cynical observers found difficult to process. No one in that room would ever forget what they were witnessing. History was being written in real time, and every person present understood they would one day tell their children and grandchildren about this moment. The journalists in the gallery had stopped typing. Their fingers hovered over keyboards, paralyzed by the magnitude of what they were hearing. Veteran reporters who had covered Washington for decades, who thought they had seen everything, found themselves genuinely shocked. This was different. This wasn't the usual partisan theater or manufactured outrage. This was something far more substantial, far more consequential. Committee members who had entered the hearing expecting another forgettable session now sat rigid in their chairs, their faces betraying a mixture of disbelief, anger, and in some cases, fear. Several of them had been colleagues with Schiff for years, had trusted him, had vouched for him. Now they were being forced to reckon with evidence that suggested everything they thought they knew was wrong. The air grew thick with apprehension, the room becoming almost claustrophobic. The only sound was the percussion of Tulsi's fingertip against the manila envelope closed before her, a rhythm that echoed in the rooted silence like a heartbeat counting down to detonation. During the approach to the Capitol breach, Congressman Schiff had attended a sequence of top-level security briefings, moments of warning regarding escalating internet traffic, the coordinated organization of extremist groups, and viable fears of interference. With the certification process had all been communicated to him. All warnings had been placed, time-stamped, and noted in official records. But there he went, coolly showing up on cable television, trivializing the entire episode as political hysteria and fear-mongering. He had dismissed genuine concerns as nothing more than partisan theater. Tulsi let her gaze sweep the room. On the side monitors, a frozen frame showed Schiff shrugging off concerns during a television interview, his face tight with practiced disdain, as he insisted these alarms were nothing more than far-right conspiracy fodder being amplified by political opponents. She opened the envelope and slid its contents across the desk. A trove of text messages between Schiff's aides and network producers revealed a coordinated effort to shape the narrative before events even unfolded. One message read, "Let's not stoke panic. Better to frame it as a Trump fallout afterward." She let the words sink in before looking up, her eyes finding Schiff's across the chamber. Schiff leaned forward, his jaw clenched so tight you could see the muscles strain. "You're twisting ordinary political spin into some grand conspiracy. Messaging is not foreknowledge of an attack." Tulsi tapped the table, then explained exactly why his defense crumbled under scrutiny. 2 days before January 6th, your office formally requested classified Capitol Police schedules, camera blind spot maps, and emergency staging details. A ripple of gasps went through the gallery like wind through wheat. She turned toward the chair. "Subpoenaed documents show your communications director marked this request urgent. The Capitol Police log confirms it was fulfilled on January 4th. She paused, letting the weight of that date hang in the air like a specter. Then she dropped the next bombshell. "On January 5th, your office circulated an internal memo. The text reads, 'If events escalate, this is our moment. Outline impeachment language immediately.'" More murmurs, cameras clicking in rapid succession. Schiff's face darkened with fury. "That's absurd," he spat. "We were simply preparing for all contingencies amid unprecedented unrest. Any responsible office would do the same." "No," Tulsi said softly, leaning in until her words carried the weight of an accusation. "You were scheming to capitalize on it. You turned a national crisis into your political playbook before we'd even seen the smoke clear. People died that day, and your office was already drafting political strategy." The room buzzed with disbelief. Tulsi kept her composure, unmoved by the emotional turmoil swirling around her. "I'm not here to relitigate January 6th, she continued. "I'm here to ask who in Congress knew of this danger and chose to exploit it instead of stopping it. From everything we've unearthed, one name stands alone." She snapped her fingers, and a new slide filled the screens, its title glowing in stark letters, "Manufactured Evidence." These documents were never meant to see the light of day, she continued, pulling out a second envelope, stamped "Declassified." A joint DOJ review focused on 2 key exhibits Schiff submitted during the first impeachment inquiry. Purported summaries of NSA intercepts that formed the backbone of his public accusations. The monitor shifted to show side-by-side transcripts, the original intelligence reports next to Schiff's official submissions. Here's where it gets damning. In Exhibit A, he quotes a Russian operative threatening election meddling, but the original NSA intercept contains no such quote. It was invented wholesale. Gasps echoed through the chamber. If you were in Tulsi Gabbard's position, facing entrenched political power with nothing but the truth, would you have the courage to press forward? Share your thoughts in the comments. In Exhibit B, he claims a tightly coordinated timeline of calls between Trump affiliates and Russian envoys. The NSA records show no calls on those dates. Some never happened at all. Others were months apart from when he claimed they occurred. She watched Schiff's composure crack like ice over a frozen lake in spring. He stammered, "Summaries are meant to clarify complex intelligence. It's textbook practice." Tulsi's tone remained calm but carried an edge of steel. Summaries clarify, fabrications deceive, inventing quotes, misstating timelines. That's not interpretation, it's fiction. She flipped to the final page, a highlighted section of the Intelligence Oversight Act. Misrepresenting classified data can violate federal law. The chamber fell into a hush so deep you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Tulsi placed the document on the desk. And there's more. An internal memo from your senior advisor states, and I quote, "Tighten the timeline, dramatize the language. No one will fact-check before the vote." Reporters leaned forward, pens poised. "These aren't the words of someone in search of truth," Tulsi said, her voice rising with controlled intensity. "They're the words of a political operative weaponizing intelligence against the American people." Schiff opened his mouth to respond, but Tulsi cut him off with a single nod. It was time for the final reveal. She reached for a crimson tab folder, its color standing out like a warning flag against the muted tones of the hearing room. This final section of evidence represented perhaps the most troubling revelation of all, because it suggested that the corruption wasn't limited to one man acting alone, but extended to an entire network designed to manipulate American democracy from within. "Last call," she announced, her voice carrying a weight that silenced the remaining murmurs in the chamber. "Internal influence operations right here in America, orchestrated by your own network." She unveiled a complex flowchart that looked like something from a spy thriller, except this was all too real. The diagram traced connections between politicians, non-profit organizations, media companies, and anonymous donors, revealing a sophisticated infrastructure of influence that had operated largely invisible to public scrutiny. The board members of these organizations read like a who's who of Washington insiders, people who moved seamlessly between government positions, lobbying firms, and media consultancies. They sat on multiple boards simultaneously, creating an interlocking network of relationships that allowed them to coordinate messaging across seemingly independent organizations. What made this particularly insidious was how it had been hidden in plain sight. Each individual organization, each individual donation, each individual media appearance appeared legitimate when viewed in isolation. Only when you stepped back and mapped the connections did the true picture emerge. A coordinated effort to shape public opinion while maintaining the illusion of organic, grassroots support. Between 2018 and 2022, Congressman Schiff is tied to 4 non-profits, all ostensibly defending democracy, but investigations show they functioned as media amplification machines. Scripted headlines, anonymous donors, planted talking points, lines on the chart traced from Schiff's name to PAC board members to shadowy donors whose identities remained hidden behind layers of shell companies. One group received over $2.5 million in anonymous foreign contributions in a single year, she said, her voice dropping low. These funds didn't just support civic engagement, they financed coordinated messaging that funneled straight into Schiff's speeches, word for word. Questions exploded from the audience. Tulsi folded her arms, letting the implications settle over the room like a shroud. This hearing had shifted fundamentally. No longer oversight, but a reckoning with the corruption that had metastasized at the heart of American democracy. She closed the folder. "We will pursue every lead in this domestic influence network, because if we don't hold those at the top accountable, chaos will be waiting for the next opportunity." She sat back, her eyes locked on Schiff. The murmur rose into a roar as the full scope of what Tulsi Gabbard had revealed became clear. As Director of Oversight, she'd laid bare a web of opportunism, fabrication, and clandestine influence, one designed to shake the very foundations of democracy itself. Tulsi clicked the remote, and a clear timeline lit up behind her. "Here's how it went," she began, her voice steady as a metronome. "On March 12th, Congressman Schiff received a sizable donation wired through offshore accounts tied to consulting firms in Qatar and Luxembourg. 3 days later, March 15th, he made a public statement on the very issue tied to that donation. By March 17th, an amendment appeared in committee, and the next morning, March 18th, an exclusive news story broke covering the exact same talking points." She glanced around the hushed room. "These aren't coincidences. When we align, Donation dates with Schiff's media appearances and committee actions. A clear pattern emerges, one of coordinated corruption. A hand shot up. Are you suggesting he orchestrated a coordinated media blitz? One committee member asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Tulsi nodded. Yes, the same talking points showed up verbatim across press releases, cable news panels, and social media feeds, all within hours of each other. This wasn't organic political discourse. It was a manufactured campaign. Tulsi advanced to her next slide. A screenshot of a Slack message from one of the non-profits. It read, "Team Adams pushing tonight's leak. Prep talking heads. Scripts are in the drive." She looked each senator in the eye one by one. That note was sent 2 days before a classified report slipped to the press. This isn't just bad judgment. It's a deliberate breach of public trust. The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. What began as a routine oversight hearing now felt like the epicenter of a national reckoning, an earthquake whose tremors would be felt for years to come. Tulsi set her binder on the table with a sense of finality that echoed through the chamber like the closing of a massive door. The evidence had been presented. The case had been made. Now came the moment that would determine whether accountability would actually follow revelation. I'm submitting a full report, signed by 3 independent federal investigators, documenting how Congressman Schiff violated intelligence oversight agreements and misled the public under oath. These investigators come from different agencies, different backgrounds, different political perspectives. Their conclusions are unanimous. The report itself ran to over 200 pages, meticulously documenting every allegation with supporting evidence. Bank records, communication logs, witness statements, intelligence assessments. The investigators had left no stone unturned in their pursuit of the truth, and their findings painted a damning portrait of systematic corruption. A collective gasp filled the chamber as the weight of her words sank in. This wasn't a partisan attack dressed up in official language. This was a formal accusation backed by the kind of evidence that prosecutors dream about, the kind of evidence that ends careers and sometimes leads to prison sentences. Some committee members exchanged worried glances, suddenly aware that their proximity to Schiff might have implications for their own careers. Others leaned forward, eager to distance themselves from a colleague who now appeared radioactive. The political calculus was already shifting in real time as lawmakers began repositioning themselves relative to this new reality. Schiff tried to interject. "You're connecting dots that don't exist," he protested, his voice cracking under the strain. Tulsi met his gaze unflinchingly. "This isn't a criminal trial, but the evidence speaks for itself. Inconsistent financial records, doctored, intelligence summaries, exploitation of a national crisis, shadow network coordination. It's all here, documented and authenticated." She tapped the projected committee code of conduct displayed behind her. "Every one of us swore an oath to transparency and truth. That oath was broken. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in this story, and share your thoughts in the comments." Then, turning to the chair, she announced, "I am referring this case to the DOJ and the House Ethics Committee. I recommend Congressman Schiff's access to classified material be suspended immediately." The chair nodded slowly, absorbing the gravity of the request. "Has the DOJ responded?" Tulsi confirmed. "They have. Special counsel is on the way." Silence pressed in like walls closing. Schiff's team shuffled papers, their faces pale as winter snow. This was no longer a partisan skirmish to be won or lost in the court of public opinion. This was about real consequences, the kind that ended careers and sometimes led to prison cells. Tulsi stood, her voice measured but carrying the weight of conviction. This isn't only about one man. It's about restoring faith in our institutions. Americans have grown cynical after too many hearings that lead nowhere, too many scandals swept under the rug, too many promises of accountability that never materialized. Today, we followed the truth wherever it led. A committee member asked, "Director Gabbard, does Congressman Schiff still pose a risk to national security?" Without hesitation, Tulsi replied, "Yes, someone who manipulates intelligence for profit and stokes fear for political gain will always choose power over country. He has demonstrated a pattern of behavior that places personal advancement above national interest." The chair sighed. "We will proceed accordingly." Tulsi let the moment settle, heavy and silent. Outside the chamber, TV crews were already flashing breaking news banners. Journalists were furiously filing reports. Social media had erupted in a frenzy of commentary and debate. Schiff, once untouchable, now sat rattled, his carefully constructed image in ruins. Tulsi bent over one last time. She had one final question that she felt the American people deserved to hear. If an elected official is able to lie about intelligence, make money on secrets, exploit crises, gain control of media, and face no actual consequences, then what would the oath of office entail? What would it mean to serve the public trust? Her words were not merely rhetoric, they had a terrific impact, landing with the force of a verdict delivered. Addressing the chair, she issued her last recommendations. First, suspend Congressman Schiff until the DOJ provides results. Second, draft a bipartisan censure resolution. Third, convene a joint hearing on the abuse of classified material. The chair accepted and called for an immediate review. Another senator asked, and if criminal wrongdoing is confirmed? Tulsi's answer was simple and direct. Then he should be prosecuted just like any citizen. No one is above the law, regardless of position or political affiliation. Schiff sat frozen in his chair as his team quietly packed up around him, their movements subdued and mechanical. The energy that had sustained him through decades of political battles had visibly drained away, leaving behind a shell of the confident figure who had entered the chamber just hours earlier. His aides moved around him like ghosts, carefully avoiding eye contact with the cameras still trained on their boss. They gathered documents, closed briefcases, exchanged whispered words. But nothing they did could change what had happened. The evidence was out. The world had seen it. There was no putting this genie back in the bottle. When the gavel came down, the hearing ended not with scandalous headlines alone, but with something rarer, something far more powerful, unassailable evidence. The kind of evidence that doesn't fade with the next news cycle, the kind that gets referenced in history books and court proceedings, the kind that changes everything. The contrast between how Schiff had entered and how he now sat slumped in his chair told the entire story. A man who had once been mentioned as a potential presidential candidate, who had commanded respect and fear in equal measure, now looked like someone who had just received a terminal diagnosis. Tulsi gathered her papers and rose from her seat with the same composed dignity she had maintained throughout the entire proceeding. The weight of what had transpired seemed to settle over the room like dust after an explosion, coating everything and everyone in its residue. The hallway outside the chamber had become a circus of media activity. Cameras jostled for position, reporters shouted questions, security personnel struggled to maintain order. The entire press corps seemed to have descended on this single location. Drawn by the magnitude of what had just occurred, a reporter called out from the gallery, "Director Gabbard, was any of this personal?" She paused, considering the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. Then she replied calmly, "No. It was necessary." With that, she stepped into the hallway, her courage and meticulous proof ensuring that from this day forward, power, truth, and accountability would be remembered as inseparable. The hearing that had begun as a routine oversight session concluded as one of the most significant moments in recent political history. Tulsi Gabbard had walked into that chamber armed with nothing but facts, documentation, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. She walked out having fundamentally altered the landscape of American politics. In the days and weeks that followed, the reverberations of her revelations would continue to echo through the corridors of power. Investigations would be launched, careers would end, the American public would be forced to confront uncomfortable truths about the systems they had trusted to protect their interests. But perhaps, most importantly, a message had been sent. Accountability was not merely a word to be invoked during campaign speeches. It was a principle that, when wielded by someone with the courage to pursue it, could shake the foundations of power itself. Tulsi Gabbard had proven that one person, armed with truth and determination, could still make a difference. In a political landscape often characterized by cynicism and disappointment, her actions that day represented something increasingly rare: hope that the system could still work, that justice could still prevail, that those who violated the public trust could still be held accountable. The gavel had fallen, but the story was far from over. For Adam Schiff, a reckoning had only just begun. For Tulsi Gabbard, a legacy of courage had been cemented in the annals of congressional history. And for the American people, a reminder had been delivered that their democracy, however flawed, still possessed the mechanisms to correct itself when brave individuals stepped forward to demand better. As cameras followed Tulsi down the marble hallway, her footsteps echoing in the silence, one thing was abundantly clear: this was a woman who had stared down power and refused to blink. Whatever came next, whatever consequences followed, whatever battles remained to be fought, she had demonstrated that truth, wielded with precision and courage, remained the most powerful weapon in democracy's arsenal. The chamber emptied slowly, its occupants filing out in stunned silence. But the evidence remained, documented and irrefutable, waiting for the wheels of justice to turn. And somewhere in the nation's capital, preparations were already underway for what promised to be one of the most consequential investigations in American political history. This had been more than a hearing, it had been a reckoning, and America would never look at its institutions quite the same way again. For those watching at home, the implications extended far beyond the fate of one congressman. The hearing had revealed systemic vulnerabilities in American democracy, the ways in which power could be abused, trust exploited, and truth manipulated by those who had sworn to uphold it. It was a sobering reminder that eternal vigilance remains the price of liberty. But it was also a story of hope, hope that individuals with courage could still make a difference, hope that truth could still triumph over power, hope that the systems designed to ensure accountability could still function when activated by those willing to take risks. Tulsi Gabbard had demonstrated what was possible when preparation meets opportunity, when evidence meets courage, when accountability meets the light of public scrutiny. Her actions that day would inspire countless others to demand better from their public servants, to insist on transparency, to refuse to accept business as usual. The sun was setting over Washington as the last reporters filed their stories, casting long shadows across the monuments that served as silent witnesses to another chapter in American democracy. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, new investigations, new developments. But tonight the nation paused to absorb what it had witnessed. Some would celebrate, seeing in Tulsi's actions the vindication of their suspicions about political corruption. Others would mourn, forced to confront uncomfortable truths about figures they had trusted. Still others would remain skeptical, demanding to see how the formal investigations would unfold before rendering judgment. But whatever one's political perspective, one thing was undeniable. Something significant had shifted in the American political landscape. The rules of engagement had changed, the expectation of accountability had been raised, and those who operated in the shadows had been put on notice that the light could find them too. Thank you so much for staying with us through this incredible story. If you felt moved, informed, or inspired by what you just witnessed, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Celebrity Chronicles, and turn on that notification bell so you never miss our stories. Drop a comment below and share your overall thoughts on this entire situation. What do you think should happen next? Your voice matters, and we read every single comment. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay strong. This is Celebrity Chronicles, and we'll see you in the next one.